The Last Supper. The Last Supper, 1495 to 1498, by Leonardo da Vinci, is a fresco in the monastery of Santa Maria delle Grazie, Milan, depicting the dramatic moment when Jesus announces that one of his disciples will betray him. The painting is full of symbolism that has sparked various conspiracy theories. One of the most controversial claims is that the figure to the right of Jesus is not the Apostle John, but Mary Magdalene, who is believed to have played a bigger role in Jesus' life than the Catholic Church recognizes. This theory was introduced by Dan Brown in his 2003 novel, The Da Vinci Code, supported by the argument that this figure has more feminine facial features. Observers claim that the composition of the figures forms the letter V, a feminine symbol in esoteric iconography, symbolizing the womb or birth. In addition, some interpretations see the use of the hands of Jesus and the disciples as a hidden pattern resembling musical notation. However, further research shows that John was often depicted with a young and delicate face in Renaissance art, not as a feminine symbol. Art historians claim that Leonardo, known for his advanced techniques, was more interested in composing emotions than inserting secret messages, although this is not entirely true. The Garden of Earthly Delights. The Garden of Earthly Delights, created around 1490 and 1510 by Hieronymus Bosch, is a triptych, a three-panel painting full of symbolism and fantastic imagination. It depicts heaven in the left panel, earthly life in the center, and hell in the right panel. While it is generally regarded as a depiction of a warning against sin, it has also sparked theories linking it to occult teachings, alchemy, and medieval mysticism. The center panel, which shows humans immersed in worldly pleasures, is considered by some scholars to be a representation of an esoteric philosophy that focuses on the duality between pleasure and suffering. Strange forms such as mutant animals, hybrid humans, and giant fruits are often interpreted as symbols of alchemy, the process of spiritual transformation. Some interpreters see this painting as a mystical teaching that symbolizes the soul's journey through the quest for worldly pleasure and spiritual enlightenment. The hellish panel on the right shows the punishment of those who have succumbed to temptation, with gruesome depictions of demonic creatures and instruments of torture. Controversy lies in whether Bosch was conveying a Christian moral message or addressing more profound occult symbolism. Researchers still debate the exact meaning of this painting, but there is no doubt that Bosch used complex and controversial spiritual symbols in his work. The Creation of Adam. The Creation of Adam, 1512, by Michelangelo, is one of the most famous pieces of the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, depicting God giving life to Adam. The painting is often seen as a representation of the relationship between God and man. However, one of the controversial interpretations of this painting is the presence of a shape resembling a human brain around God and the angels, which was proposed by surgeon Dr. Frank Meshberger in 1990. According to this theory, the shapes surrounding God and the angels, which appear to be the membranes of the brain, brainstem, and optic nerve, are symbolic of the human brain. This leads to the interpretation that Michelangelo may be inserting a hidden message that God not only gave physical life, but also intelligence and consciousness to Adam. This interpretation becomes more interesting as Michelangelo had an in-depth knowledge of anatomy after conducting a detailed study of the human body, including the brain, through cadaver dissection. Controversy arises from the implication that Michelangelo may have wanted to show that human consciousness is a divine aspect that is as important as physical life. In addition, some interpreters see this as a subtle criticism of the Church, which in those days tended to suppress scientific study. This interpretation remains a topic of debate, although it is of interest to those looking for hidden symbolism in Michelangelo's religious art. The Arnolfini Portrait. The Arnolfini Portrait, 1434, by Jan van Eyck, is one of the most mysterious paintings in art history, full of symbolism that provokes various interpretations. The painting depicts the couple Giovanni di Niccolao di Arnolfini and his wife in a ceremony, often thought to be a wedding. However, some theories claim that this painting holds hidden spiritual or occult messages. One of the most controversial elements is the convex mirror in the background. This mirror reflects not only the couple, but also two other figures believed to be witnesses to the ceremony, one of whom may be Van Eyck himself. Mirrors in Renaissance iconography often symbolize the soul, consciousness, or even divine supervision. It has also been suggested that this mirror depicts observations from the eye of God that are invisible to the people in the painting. Other symbols, such as the little dog at the feet of the couple, symbolize loyalty but also have a deeper spiritual meaning in the context of depicting the fidelity of the soul. The single lit candle in the candlestick symbolizes the divine presence or living soul in the marriage. There's also debate as to whether Arnolfini's wife is pregnant or simply wearing a fancy dress that emphasizes her belly, which could symbolize fertility or the role of women in spiritual rituals. The main controversy relates to whether the painting actually depicts a marriage or a business contract, and the deep meaning behind each symbol is still debated today. The Last Judgment, 1536 to 1541 by Michelangelo, which adorns the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel, is one of the most controversial works of art in Renaissance art history. The painting depicts the coming of Christ on the Day of Judgment, with souls either being raptured to heaven or relegated to hell. However, Michelangelo's depiction sparked controversy over spiritual symbolism and occult elements. One of the biggest controversies was the depiction of Jesus without a beard, which was highly unusual in Christian art of the time. Jesus was depicted more as an athletic and powerful figure, resembling a Greek god like Apollo rather than the traditional depiction of a gentle and loving Jesus. This has led to debate about whether Michelangelo was trying to interject a symbolic message of divine power that had more to do with classical mythology than Orthodox Christian iconography. In addition, the painting is also filled with nude figures, which many church officials considered inappropriate. Cardinal Carafa and some other clergy demanded that the painting be modified, and eventually some parts were covered by the artist Daniele da Volterra, who was later nicknamed Il Bragatone, the pants installer, for his task of covering the nudity. Other symbolism, such as wingless angels and depictions of tortured saints, add an element of mystery. For example, Saint Bartholomew is depicted holding his flayed skin, which some interpreters believe to be a representation of Michelangelo's face, symbolizing the artist's personal spiritual struggle. The painting is seen as a work full of unusual spiritual symbols, challenging church doctrine and exposing Michelangelo's more complex thoughts on the afterlife. Saturn Devouring His Son, 1819 to 1823 by Francisco Goya, is one of the darkest and most controversial works in art history. The painting depicts Saturn or Cronus in Greek mythology eating his son, in accordance with the myth in which Saturn swallowed his children for fear that they would overthrow him, as predicted. Goya took this myth and depicted it in a very gruesome way, where Saturn is depicted with a crazed look and the half-eaten body of the child. The main controversy of this painting is not only in its palpable violence, but also in its deep symbolism. Saturn is often seen as a symbol of time consuming everything, including human lives, dreams, and power. Some scholars claim that Goya used this myth to voice his concerns for Spain at the time, entangled in absolute power, oppression, and the fear of losing control. There are also interpretations that relate this painting to Goya's personal situation, who at the time was in a state of deteriorating mental health, feeling isolated and depressed. In addition to mythological meanings, some interpreters associate this painting with occult elements. Saturn in astrology and the occult symbolizes the cycle of destruction and regeneration, which is often associated with spiritual transformation and even self-destruction. The expressive and violent style used by Goya fuels the interpretation that this is a manifestation of his deepest fears about life, time, and death, making it one of his most disturbing works and full of symbolic messages. The Scream. The Scream 1893 by Edvard Munch is one of the most iconic and symbolic paintings in the art world, depicting a distorted-looking human figure screaming in horror amidst a backdrop of undulating nature. While the painting is often thought of as a representation of existential angst, there are some deeper interpretations related to spirituality and even the occult. Munch himself described the inspiration for this painting as a moment when he felt the scream of nature while walking by a fjord in Oslo. The striking red sky in the painting was most likely inspired by the Krakatoa volcanic eruption in 1883, which caused dramatic celestial phenomena for many years. However, for some interpreters, the bold colors and undulating shapes are thought to reflect an inner emotion that transcends physical reality, hinting at a connection with a spiritual or metaphysical dimension. There are theories that associate the scream with the representation of extraordinary spiritual experiences, such as a feeling of disconnection from the universe or a terrifying mystical epiphany. The figure in this painting is depicted separated from the people in the background, highlighting the feeling of inner isolation that is often considered part of mystical experiences or even occult enlightenment. Some interpretations see this as a manifestation of the widespread influence of spiritualism in the late 19th century, when society began to study the concept of life after death, other worlds, and the anxiety that comes from uncertainty about human existence. This painting remains a symbol of modern man's anxieties, but it also holds a deeper spiritual element related to inner terror and man's relationship with the unreachable universe. The Birth of Venus, 1486 by Sandro Botticelli, is one of the most recognizable Renaissance paintings depicting the birth of the goddess Venus from the sea on a large shell carried by the wind of the god Zephyrus. The painting is full of controversial spiritual and esoteric symbols, as it features pagan themes and earthly beauty at a time when the influence of the Catholic Church was still very strong. The painting's main controversy was its depiction of a nude Venus, which was considered unusual and even daring in the religious context of 15th century Europe. The painting is thought to reflect a revival of the teachings of Platonism, especially the idea of heavenly and earthly love. Venus in this context is seen as a symbol of love that transcends the physical, touching a higher spiritual aspect. However, other interpretations associate this work with occultism and Neoplatonic mysticism, which was popular among Florence intellectuals of the time. Neoplatonism emphasizes that physical beauty can bring one closer to God and spiritual truth, and Venus is considered the embodiment of this idea. Some scholars also argue that Botticelli incorporated secret symbolism related to the esoteric orders of the Renaissance, which sought to harmonize ancient pagan ideas with Christian spiritual thought. In addition, the ethereal natural background and the wind-carrying Venus are also considered symbols of a harmonious universe, in accordance with the idea that Venus represents harmony and love that unites all elements of life. The Birth of Venus thus depicts not only earthly beauty, but also a hidden spiritual message of love, harmony, and the relationship between the mortal and the divine, which made it controversial in its day. Guernica, 1937 by Pablo Picasso, is one of the most controversial and profound works of art dealing with the themes of war and human suffering. The painting depicts the atrocities of an air raid on the city of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War, carried out by Nazi forces at the request of Spanish nationalists. However, more than just a depiction of war, the painting is filled with spiritual and occult symbols that have sparked various interpretations. The painting features a mix of human and animal characters, including bulls, horses, and birds, each of which contains powerful symbolism. The bull is often associated with brute force and tyranny, while the wounded horse symbolizes the suffering of the Spanish people. There is speculation that Picasso used these symbols not only to convey human sorrow, but also as representatives of a greater spiritual struggle between the forces of light and darkness, life and death. Another prominent symbol is the large eye at the top of the painting, which emits light like a light bulb, often interpreted as the eye of God or a symbol of divine supervision over human destruction. It can be taken as a warning about the presence of a spiritual force overseeing human brutality, or as a critique of the moral indifference of the greater powers in war. The use of monochrome colors and fragmented forms has also been interpreted as a representation of the spiritual chaos and moral disintegration of the world at a time of war. Picasso avoided bright colors to create an atmosphere of gloom and terror, which added a spiritual element of emptiness and total destruction experienced by mankind. As such, Guernica is not only a political statement on the atrocities of war, but also a work full of spiritual and occult symbolism, reflecting human suffering within a larger cosmic context. La Belle Dame sans Merci, 1926, by Frank Cadogan Cowper, is based on John Keats' poem of the same name. The painting depicts a beautiful and mysterious woman who captivates a knight, only to leave him abandoned and obsessed. In addition to its visual beauty, the painting is full of symbolism that is often associated with spirituality, mysticism, and the occult. The female figure in this painting represents the archetype of the femme fatale, which often appears in literature and art as a symbol of a mysterious force that has the power to corrupt men. In the context of the occult, this woman can be seen as a representation of a spiritual entity that seduces humans into destructive illusions or temptations, often interpreted as a manifestation of dark energy or mystical forces. In the original poem, Keats describes her as a supernatural being who ensnares the knight with her beauty, then disappears, leaving the knight in despair. This element is often interpreted as a symbol of the carnal attractions that can distract humans from their spiritual goals. Cowper captures this moment perfectly in his work, where the woman looks alluring yet frightening, showing the tension between temptation and destruction. The symbolism of wilting flowers and the somber setting in the painting are also often associated with the symbolism of death and despair, suggesting that the woman's beauty and attractiveness are temporary illusions that lead to the destruction of the soul. Overall, La Belle Dame sans Merci depicts a spiritual story of temptation, illusion, and destruction that emphasizes the mystical and occult forces behind worldly attraction.